Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by a couple of great guys from SocketTime. Today, we're going to talk with them about technician scheduling and the importance of adapting your outlook in regard to scheduling. This is obviously something that a lot of shops that are out there really struggle with, and how to control your maybe car count, how to accurately and really effectively be able to schedule your technician. So welcome to the show, Matthew Donovan and Craig
Thank you.
Misak. How are you guys doing today?
Glad to be here. Yep.
Good. Well, I'm really excited to dive into this, learn more about SocketTime, and really how this has an impact on the industry. So like we do in most shows, we're going to start off by getting to know both of you a little bit. Matthew, why don't we start off with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am the fixed operations director for the Wolfe Automotive Group in Kansas City. Oversee two Toyota stores, two Acura stores, and a Honda store. And I grew up working in an independent shop that was owned by my family. And I'm an ASE master technician and have an engineering degree from the University of Kansas. I actually went to work for Mitsubishi Motors and Kia Motors for about 13 years and did everything from designing cars to helping fix cars that dealerships were unable to fix in the field. So I had a lot of great experiences working with multiple dealers all over the country doing that. And now I've had the opportunity to become co-founder of SocketTime, and we're kind of changing the way the automotive service, service department runs and the way automotive scheduling works.
Hard to top those credentials. I've got 14 years of experience in the automotive industry, mainly implementing CRMs, building BDC call centers, and really what led to some of these opportunities to work with Matthew on building SocketTime, because as we transitioned the BDCs over to different software packages, the realization that they had some lacking opportunities, it kind of opened the door to start conversations and build a software that met the Wolfe Automotive needs.
It's a really fascinating background and conversation with the two of you prior to hitting record on this podcast today. A lot of really fun conversation. And so I think it's going to be an entertaining conversation over the course of this hour, and one that we're going to learn a lot about. So let's start with this, and I'll let either one of you go, but tell us a little bit about SocketTime for those of our listeners that are unfamiliar with what SocketTime is.
Sure. So SocketTime was basically founded on the idea that service departments should run a little differently than they do currently. Most shops schedule all their appointments to the service advisor. Well, the issue with that is you're not truly consuming the correct amount of time with what the technician has available, the bay availability, the schedules and how much work is needing to be done on each of those vehicles. So your shop is never truly run efficiently. Either you have way too much work or not enough, but you're never running efficient and to where cars are coming in, going out, and as expected or what the customer's expectations are. So we've changed that mindset with SocketTime. We said, look, the best way to manage a shop is scheduling all the jobs to the technician, and that's why we built SocketTime. So it really. Go ahead.
Yeah, how did that come to be? Like, and obviously both of you coming from this industry, I think being able to be front lines of it and see some of the difficulties that come along with it. What was it that even generated the conversation to get rolling with SocketTime?
Sure. Well,
the stack of unfinished work that could never make it into the shop.
Yeah. So I mean, just within the Wolfe Automotive Group, we were struggling to get through stacks of ROs of cars that were sitting there, and customers needing their cars repaired, and our dispatchers were overwhelmed with work. For some reason, our scheduler was still saying yes to appointments because advisors had availability. And so we were always kind of running in this chaos mode of, upsetting customers because their cars weren't fixed in a timely fashion. And yet our technicians were stressed out because they're saying, hey, I'm tired of not being able to take a lunch, or I'm tired of being able to tell, the advisors telling me, hey, this car's got to go today. Well,
So does all the other
we
12
plan?
ones,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. But it was like, how come we didn't see this train wreck coming? So that's why we built SocketTime. Is we started looking at other tools in the market, and we said nothing really does what we want to do. We want to have this kind of ultimate communication between the dispatching of the work into the shop and the technician availability, tied in with the online schedule, tied in with the advisors when they're setting appointments. We want all that to be together. And then, in addition, the multi-point inspections, because if you bring a car in that's in for, let's say, an oil change, and then you upsell 8 hours worth of work, well, your online schedule needs to know that. You can't just keep saying yes to more work for tomorrow and the next day if you've just upsold a whole bunch of work. So if all that's not integrated and talking seamlessly together in real time, then you aren't ever going to have a truly efficiently run shop and be able to please everyone, right? So, and that's our goals. We want to meet customer expectations. Actually, we want to exceed them. We want to be better than other shops. We want to actually be able to commit to promise times and deliver on every one of them. We want the technicians to go home at the end of the day and say, I got as much work as I possibly could have done, but I wasn't stressed about it. Everything worked out. I didn't have too many unreasonable expectations put on me, and that's what we were wanting to achieve, and we've been able to achieve that with SocketTime. In fact, we're in just as many independent shops now as we are dealerships, and so it's exciting to see that we're helping kind of both sides of the automotive service world, with the same concept. So it's working well for everyone.
Then on the administrative side, more because I was coming from a different angle, right? You got BDCs, you have call centers, you've got all these software packages all intertwined and trying to communicate and everything. And so typically before SocketTime, we'd get the panic call from a manager and go, "Hey, shut down the shop," and we'd shut her down, and 3-4 days would go by, and then they'd finally get that elephant through the shop with that glut of work, and then there's a lag. So then it was the panic of, we're not busy enough, so open it up, right? And so it was this constant kind of ebb and flow between too busy, not enough, that he was mentioning earlier. And that's compounding on itself, because as you then take in more work and you upsell work, and then you go into tomorrow, and start to consuming capacity that you had promised to tomorrow, they kind of jumble on themselves, right, if you will. And so then it just starts the process over again. So properly predicting, properly managing the hours, because that's really ultimately what you have. You only have a finite number of hours to sell out of any given shop. Whether you have 10 technicians or 40 technicians, you only have so many hours. You can't continue to say yes to more and more and more and more work, because it's just never going to make it through.
Well, some of it is a shift in mindset, right? Because we talked about this prior to getting onto the podcast, and that the way I was raised in the industry was that you packed the shop full of cars and you just kept bringing them in, and we were almost wearing that high car count as a badge of honor. And looking back, and it took coaching for me to really change my perspective on this, but having your car count under control, having your shop under control, like if you don't do that, it's just going to constantly feel like you're spinning out of control. And that's not a fun time for anybody. Everybody's miserable at that point.
Well, we came to it's a very need-based software development. So, a lot of what we developed through this was, we see a deficiency here, we're going to go fix it in a better way, right? So one of the ideas was happy hour oil changes. Hey, between 3 and 5, we'll give away, at the time it was much cheaper, $19.95 oil changes, right, to compete against the Jiffy Lubes. And so instead of doing a happy hour, what SocketTime does is finds the jobs that are capable of being moved in the afternoon. It will do that automatically, because it'll consume the capacity later in the afternoon, and then simultaneously open up more morning appointments, the coveted morning appointments. But it's doing all that naturally. We're not giving away our money. We're not giving away coupons, and we're not trying to drive business into the afternoon. It's literally doing all that for you, and it's just consuming the tech's time when you have a customer that's not waiting around. Because it's good.
Yeah, I say what Craig's talking about is that our scheduler. That's the other thing that makes it unique, is that appointment time is not necessarily a set appointment time with our schedule. It depends on what the customer's pickup time is. So if they say, hey, I want an 8 a.m. appointment, but I'm not picking up till 5 o'clock tonight, well, if we're only doing an hour worth of work on that car, that doesn't need to consume the 8 a.m. time slot. So our whole focus is just about how do we maximize the day with hours, but still meet every customer's expectation of what their pickup time is, when they need that car back. And that's really one of the things that we were hearing from our service advisors at the Wolfe Group, and then as far as what I heard when I was traveling around meeting dealers on the OEM side was you'd hear service advisors say to customers, this was customers that are upset, right? They'd say, well, that appointment time wasn't actually for your car to get fixed. That was for you to meet with the service advisor. And when the car's going in the shop, that's maybe tomorrow or whatever, right? Well, that's not meeting the customer's expectations. And we're all about the repeat and referral business. We want those customers coming back, right? We want them telling their friends how wonderful the experience was. Well, you can't do that if you're telling them, well, your appointment time really meant nothing in a way. It was appointment time with me with an advisor, but if we can't deliver on those promised times of when the car is going to be fixed, that's an issue. So our schedule looks at those promised times and then maximizes all the hours of the day. And that's what we're doing. We're selling hours in the service department. We're trying to maximize every technician's day, and it's really about for us looking at it in a way kind of like a doctor's office, right? Because doctor's offices they want to maximize that doctor's time in the office, and that's what the technician is. They're a doctor working on that car in a way. So we look at it as if you're not maximizing that individual's day through time estimation of every job, it's never going to work out properly. And one of the key things here too is that when you look at just an appointment count, that can mean so many different things, right? So a lot of shops they say, okay, well the magic number is let's say 75, right? And well, is that 75 oil changes or 75 timing belts, right? It's a much different day depending on the work mix. So with SocketTime, the appointment count is irrelevant. It's all about do we maximize every hour. And so some days, for example, like with the Wolfe Group, I mean, the way it works for us is some days we'll have 100 appointments, some days we'll have 120, and other days we might have 75. It doesn't really matter as long as every hour was filled for every technician through the day. And one of the side benefits of this too is, or one of the, I guess the big benefits that we see for technicians is that, they're staying busy, they're producing more hours than ever, but yet they don't feel the pressure from the service advisor or the manager saying, hey, this car's got to go. You can't take a lunch today. We got too much work here, whatever. They don't have that pressure. So our technicians are happier. They like the fact that they have the flexibility in the schedule and that they can tell us their schedule when they can be there. If they need to take off Thursdays at noon or whatever it is, our schedule just adapts for that. It knows that it can't take in work Thursday afternoon because that's when that technician wants that time off. So it really allows for that ultimate flexibility and helps everyone really have a better experience.
Boy, is that such a key right there. And this is something that, we talk about technicians all the time, whether through WrenchWay or through the podcast. I feel like my life is revolving around technicians in general. That flexibility and the ability to allow a technician to have a flexible schedule is such a benefit. And there are so many different backgrounds and so many different situations that technicians as individuals find themselves in. Maybe they're a single parent, maybe they're taking care of an elderly parent. There's just so many different things that come into play. And I think the more we go and the more we evolve as an industry, the more flexibility you can have, and controlled flexibility for both sides is a huge, huge benefit. And when you say that, I'm just like, man, talk about a huge benefit for technicians moving forward. That flexibility is absolutely huge.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I tell you, just here at the Wolfe Automotive Group, we've recruited probably a dozen technicians because of that flexible schedule. Guys that say, hey, I need to pick up my kids from school every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, so I need to be gone by 2:30. Most shops say, well, that doesn't work. This is your schedule, 8 to 5 or 7 to 4, whatever it is, and you're expected to be here. With us, it's ultimate flexibility. It's, hey, no problem. We just set that schedule up, and we just don't take appointments for that technician from that time. So it doesn't. No one knew any different, right? The customers didn't know that there wasn't that time available. The advisors really didn't think about it. No one really understood that that's what we were doing. It's just we just didn't have too much work here, right, for the shop, and it wasn't that well, we've already promised all this stuff to different customers, and now you have to stay because we've already sold all this work that you have to be here to do. It just doesn't happen. So it really is such a benefit to technicians that offer them that flexibility. I mean, nowadays that is one of the, to us, one of the biggest recruiting tools when you can offer flexibility.
I think it's phenomenal. Now, I want to use that exact scenario here and kind of talk through how the scheduling works in that regard, right? So, say you do have that technician that is leaving at 2:30. How does it work if you're bringing somebody in and say you've scheduled a job for that technician and they're going to end up being mid job when they have to leave, or is that kind of eliminated with the software? It kind of walk me through that scenario a little bit to help us understand.
Well, it actually kind of depends on what the job is, and as a service manager, you get to decide whether or not you force the job to end at the end of the day, or if it's a larger job. Let's say you're doing a timing belt that's maybe flags 6-8 hours, you can actually set it up to wrap the days. And it finds, before it even says yes to the customer, it's going to find a contiguous technician so he can start on it, pause mid, and then promise to the customer it'll be done in the morning of the next day. And so that's one thing most schedulers don't offer, because you have to lie to it. Be like, oh, well, this is a 6-hour job when it's 10, because that's the only time it can kind of fit in that spot. Well, we don't care. As long as the manager's okay for larger jobs breaking and wrapping to another day, it will then make those expectations or set those expectations up front to the customer, and it's just flows through.
Yeah.
So if they need to leave it,
No.
If they need to leave at 3, go skin our back. They'll be back at 7 a.m. and finish it up.
Yeah. So we call it day wrapping with our appointments. It's where, we'll take an 8-hour appointment at 3:00 in the afternoon, as long as the customer, and we'll tell them the earliest you can pick up your vehicle is, let's say, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Well, it'll let them know that. They may say, well, I'm not going to pick it up at 2, I'll pick it up at 5 p.m. Okay, no problem. And our schedule then knows how to work that. But it's going to say yes to that 3:00 appointment if they're saying, I'm going to drop off and I'm planning on picking it up, tomorrow. So if the technician in the flexible schedule, if they need that time off where they say, hey, I need to leave at 3:00 or whatever, no problem. It's just that car is going to stay in their bay, and it's going to consume additional time for that next day. So they're still working on that. It's not, well, we've already said yes to something. At 7 a.m. tomorrow, you can't possibly leave because this job has to go. So our schedule's smart enough to know how to schedule those types of appointments.
And if it's a small, like, oil change, you don't want that stuck overnight. Now, you can, but I wouldn't, it's not always ideal to have a small job sitting there overnight unnecessarily. So you block that based upon the op code and just say, hey, if it's an oil change, tire rotation, that's just going to happen at a different day, right? Because we can't fit it into that 3 because he needs to leave at 3:30 sort of an environment. But when you go in there and set it up, you choose which ones are allowed to wrap multiple days.
Are you starting with basically the customer's expectation up front then, and being able to kind of work your way almost backwards? Maybe I'm
in a way,
exactly.
It's all customer focused. I mean, every bit of this is trying to really maximize your CSI as much as it is maximizing the profit of the store, because we also go and look at the technician's speed and find the fastest technician that's qualified to do that work. And so it finds the best. And there's a balancing act there, right? You don't want the fastest guy that's been around, the longest, constantly getting all the gravy. It balances the shop a little bit in a sense, because it starts seeing he's a master tech. So he's going to do things faster than I would. I grew up on a farm, so I can spin a wrench, but not nearly as well as he can. So we can find him jobs and maximize the profit up to a point, and then, hey, I need some training opportunities. I need an opportunity to take a crack at some of those same jobs, and it will balance that out a little bit. So it's not always favoriting the fastest, best tech, but it tries to find the most most efficient tech for the jobs.
Yeah, tries to maximize every day and say yes to as many customers as possible. And and we call it playing Tetris too, because the manager has the ability to go in and override things and say, well, I know this customer is coming in. I know this particular car. I'm going to go ahead and lengthen this appointment, shorten it, move it around to a different technician because I know I want it to go into a certain guy. So there's this really simple kind of user interface where you can just drag and drop and move appointments around at a click of a button. And it's not like most schedulers, you have to go in, okay, you have to tell it. I tell you what, I want to move that appointment to 3 p.m. and you select the time and you select maybe the date and you have multiple buttons to click. Ours is literally just a drag and drop. It kind of feels like a mobile phone or something where you can just click and drop and move things around, and any one of those changes instantaneously updates the online schedule. So if you're dragging an appointment and moving it on your dispatch management screen, your online scheduler now knows that and is not going to offer that appointment time, or it's going to offer a different appointment time, whatever, for the customer that's on your website.
That also solves a huge issue or maybe a cause of contention in a shop that we hear about a lot, which is that technician that's sitting out there saying, well, Bob over there, he gets all the gravy work. I don't, the service manager loves Bob. I'm not getting any, right? Like there's always that conversation in a shop.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So the schedule will try to maximize the shop and pre-assign the work to the best, like Craig was saying, the best skilled, fastest technicians that can do those to maximize the day. It doesn't always work out that the fastest, most skilled guy gets the timing belt job or the water pump or whatever it is that a lot of guys might like of a certain brand, but it's going to find the way to the best maximize all the hours in the shop for that day and meet all the customer commitments. So the schedule's smart enough to move things around and know based on what the promise time or what the pickup time is in the incoming appointments that keep coming in, how to best maximize the day. So it's pretty, in every job, the service manager goes in, I should say every job, every labor op, the service manager goes in ahead of time and assigns a minimum and maximum time and of what that job is estimated to take to get done. And then that way the schedule knows how to assign that to the, when the appointments are coming in. So the schedule is basically estimating a job time for everything.
If you're enjoying Beyond the Wrench, remember to follow and rate our podcast to help support the show. Right now, we would like to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Sonic Tools. Sonic Tools' direct distribution model offers affordable prices without sacrificing quality and service. Their goal is to increase the efficiency of every technician with the equipment solutions and the Sonic foam system that organizes quality tools in ways that award every technician with the opportunity to excel. Visit SonicToolsUSA.com to learn more. One other thing that I think a lot of technicians, especially those diagnosticians, really struggle with, and shops in general really struggle with, is how to sell diagnostic time and how to be able to account for it, how to even know how much time to give for that. Sure. Any advice, or whether it's with your software or just in running a shop in general, in terms of how you sell diagnostic time and how you put a time frame on diagnostics, especially with those ones that can kick your butt?
Sure. So the way the schedule's set up and kind of our belief on the best way to do this is, one, you have, I guess, just to start at ground zero, that what a lot of customers want is they just say they have a check engine light and they want to know what it is. So we'll scan that at no charge, and we'll bring that out in without assigning more than just 6 to 12 minutes for that scan, and that's just to have the conversation about, hey, do you want to go further? And that's something we do at no charge, because the Napas, the O'Reillys, those places will do it for you at no charge anyway. So why not offer the same thing? At least bring them in and have a conversation. After that, depending on how many different things they have wrong, we'll usually add anywhere from a half hour to an hour for every concern they have. So if they say, hey, I've got a check engine light, but I've also got, this weird noise coming out of the rear end, and I got this, so then we start adding on an hour for every one of those items. And then from there, you decide if you have to sell additional diagnostic time, or if you figured out what's going on and you need to either order parts or you need to, do the repairs, then we reassign that additional work in the schedule as an additional appointment. So that appointment then gets kind of broken apart, and that additional time is reallocated. So, let's say you order parts and they're going to be here at noon tomorrow. Well, then we need to go and take that appointment and assign those extra, let's say it's 2 hours worth of sold work to make the repairs. We need to assign 2 hours of work for tomorrow afternoon when those parts are going to be here. And then that way you're not continuing to say yes to more appointments tomorrow afternoon. Well, you can't do that if you've already got a job set up to be in tomorrow afternoon. So, and that's kind of the flaw with most schedulers, is that you don't have that communication between the multi-point inspection or the upsold work and your online schedule, or what the advisors or your call center or whoever's setting those appointments. If they're not all completely aware of that upsold work, then they're making commitments they can't possibly meet. They can't deliver on, and that's kind of the fundamental issue that we were trying to fix with SocketTime. Was we want to be able to meet customer commitments.
I mean, if you have 75 appointments today, and let's say all of them get another round of work done, you're in essence taking 75 appointments for tomorrow too, but you've already said yes to 75 other appointments, right? That's where that flow that we were talking about earlier starts causing problems. So you always have to consume futures capacity correctly and then shut it down so we get accurate times. Yeah.
It's so fascinating to me, because I think this is something that most shops struggle with. Most shops really have a hard time of maybe pushing a customer down the road, right? If you've got a customer coming in, your natural human instinct is to get them in the shop as fast as you can. But I think what Matthew was saying there about being able to view it like a doctor is so important, because I think that's a mindset thing as much as anything, right? Is being able to really look at it and say, hey, these are very professional people. Their time is very valuable, and we can't just kind of really go at this in a way that is disorganized and really, I don't know. To me, it just makes all the sense in the world, because even when you guys are talking about scheduling, and maybe as we see this go to more specialty types of techs, where you do have more straight up diagnosticians that their job is to diagnose cars, if you're basically creating another job for the repair itself, I think that makes that part very seamless too, right? Because if you've got somebody that's actually diagnosing the job and then somebody else is fixing it, I think the future of our industry is kind of naturally shifting that direction. I think that makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way the schedule's set up is, that's literally just a couple clicks to reassign that work. And it's even based on, for like a dealership world, it's going to be based on the actual true part availability and when that comes in. They can put in tracking numbers and all kinds of stuff. There's ways that we make it as simple as possible to reallocate that time and to know, all the details of that appointment and when that stuff's coming in. So one thing about our schedule too that's kind of neat is every communication is stored within the appointment, and we have this internal chat feature and we have an external chat with customers, but everything is stored within the appointment. So if tomorrow we need to go back and look and see, okay, which parts person said what about that part, what did we tell the customer? Oh, okay, I see we told the customer this in a text communication, and then the technician texted the parts department, and the parts department told the advisor this. You can see all that in a kind of communication flow within the appointment, which is very, very helpful and saves a lot of walking around the shop and back and forth to the parts counter. And then, when you have all those communications happening outside of the tool too, that can be an issue, right? Because if you keep it all together, then no one's not on the same page, right? And so if you have we built in multiple features within SocketTime, and depending on the shop, however they want to run, they can use these things or not. But we built them in because we found that having all this communication within the appointment and within the inspection is very helpful.
Very helpful.
Especially when you look at a car that comes back 3, 6, 9 months down the road, and what do we tell this customer back then, or what repairs did we made, what were declined? And if an advisor, when they're setting that next appointment, they can see those declined services when they're setting the appointment. So it's kind of that whole life cycle of the appointment and the customer is, hey, they declined some work last time, or maybe we gave them kind of rated some things on the inspection as a yellow. Hey, next time you're going to need these things. Well, it'd sure be nice, right, to have all that back in that appointment when you're going to set that next appointment to remind the customer, hey, these are some things we talked to you about. So having all that communication, all that information within one tool just really, really helps all of us, do a better job and sell more work.
And kind of touching in on the communication to drive it home a bit, it sounds tedious, but I'd implore everyone to maybe watch the techs walk around, because when they've got work, what do they typically do? They take their recs to the parts counter. They talk about, what was going on last week or the game or whatever it is. Well, that's few. And then they take all of that and take it up to the advisor. And then conversation happens, again. And then they walk back to their bay waiting for the parts. And then once the parts are approved, if they know about them, they'll walk up and get them. And so it's kind of stopwatch that. I did in a few shops, and the average wasted time was 14 minutes per RO, which is an incredible amount of time. Well, a little bit of math. If you do 14 times, 100 ROs a day, I mean, it's 1,400 minutes walking divided by 60 times your door rate of, let's say, 175. It's $4,000 a day of tech's time wasted walking around, and then times that by 255 days open. I mean, it's $1 million walking. I mean, just a little visual. I mean, it's not exactly accurate, but do that.
Well, but your potential, right?
Huge. Even if I'm half wrong or 10% right, it's still a huge amount of money wasted walking. So using internal communication tools that keep everyone working and focused on, earning money and spinning a wrench and, flagging hours, that's way more valuable to everyone involved than walking. I mean, that's what gave birth to the Socket Talk and cleaning up that communication, because within the tool you can share a job over, and then no one has to think, well, what was the tag number? What was the R number? What's the customer number? What's the VIN? They click a link and it pops up immediately to that appointment. That's the conversation is related to. So again, just trying to find every one of these need-based, solutions and speed that up.
Yeah, all about efficiency.
Yeah. Without getting 12 different software packages all cobbled together, I've seen a lot of shops do very well coming up with very interesting connections, but having it all in one spot is key.
Yeah.
I love your stopwatch exercise. We used to do kind of spaghetti charts, right? And you would use a different marker for each technician, and you would basically map out the shop and then track their steps all throughout the day. And it was awkward. It was awkward to sit out there and stare at the text while you're doing it. But at the same time, you learn so much by doing that. And that is something that any shop can do. Just go out, sit down, maybe set up a temporary desk in the shop and just watch your people over the course of the day and track them. And maybe let them know ahead of time, so it's just not you awkwardly sitting out in the shop.
You just pull up the camera. It's not supposed to be an exact science here. I mean, but it's eye-opening when you start putting numbers to that wasted time as a shop manager, and even a tech. I mean, if that amount of time out of my days wasted walking, that adds up. I mean,
I tell you, speaking of efficiencies, one thing that we've done to help on the technician side as well, especially in the independent world, and not all of our dealerships do this, but on the independent side, we have the availability for technicians to look up their own parts within the inspection tool and it pulls with literally just one click. It pulls all the on-hand inventory at O'Reilly, Napa, AutoZone. I mean, almost any.
Or your DMS. Or your DMS.
Yeah, if you have parts on hand, it's going to pull those. So you know your on-hand inventory, but it's going to pull all that inventory with one search within the inspection. So, let's say you need a serpentine belt. You go in, you search just that, and it's going to pull up and tell you, oh, hey, you know what, Napa that we do business with right down the road, they have it on the shelf, and the technician can both price it within the multi-point inspection there with one click, and they can also order it with one click as well, which the aftermarket is like, this saves so much time versus picking up the phone or going to individual websites for each different, aftermarket parts provider and looking to see what they have. Well, now it's just literally one click and you get all of them on one screen.
I think we might be the only industry that still uses faxes. So
it's a scientific fact. We're the only ones.
Yeah. But from here, like you said, you could just one click order. I mean, it shows up at your back loading dock if that's what your delivery is negotiated as. It's really slick.
That's awesome. One question I've got, and this is always interesting to me, in that anytime something changes, I believe technicians are skeptical a lot, right? And if we go into that conversation and say, I'm bringing in SocketTime, and you're going to sit down with your technicians and maybe explain to them the change, do you have any advice, whether it's implementation of this or maybe it's just you're changing a process within the shop, but that communication with technicians is so hard at times, and communication is hard in any business, right? Even for us at WrenchWay internally, it can be a real challenge to keep everybody up to date that's supposed to be up to date, really be able to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of a process. But when you start tweaking something with a technician, you start to get maybe that pushback a little bit. Do you have any experience with that? And I'm sure you do, but more so, any advice to that shop manager that's out there in terms of how to handle that relationship?
Sure. So what we found is that anytime we install SocketTime in a store, we have several trainers come out and work with that store and that shop to make sure everyone knows what's going on. But we found the technicians are actually the easiest to adopt what we've done. Because they look at it and they say, well, this is so simple. You just want me to, add my inspection results, just a couple buttons to click. Even the inspection, we've done things where if you fill in, let's say, a tire size, rather than having to look on the tire and type it all in manually, we already know based on the VIN what tire sizes came on an OEM. So that's this one, and they can just click on, okay, that's the 19-inch wheel with this tire size, so they don't have to even go in and manually type in the numbers. It will give that to them. So there's a lot of buttons that we've developed, or ways that we've looked for time savings for them. And so once we show those features, they go, oh, this is really simple. I like this. And it takes, usually that's the easiest part of our install. Less than an hour, technicians are like, hey, I got it. This is great. It's the more challenging part is on the advisor, because there's just more for them to learn. They have to understand how to set an appointment, how to look at an inspection, how to communicate with a customer. There's just more interaction with the tool that they're doing on a daily basis.
And I think mentally, it's a change in especially if they've been used to the way of putting a promise time that may be a little ahead of schedule, in hopes that it gets through the shop. I'm not saying anyone does that, but
that would never happen.
That would absolutely never happen. Or maybe dog ear if they know it's not really a waiter. It's not that I've ever seen any of these things happen, but trusting that it's, when I say it's at 4, that car is going to arrive in my hand at 3:55. That's a big shift, I think, from what I've seen in a lot of shops, and getting to that point is important, right? So that way the advisors start to trust, hey, when I put this in, I know that the dispatcher is going to get it in when it promises, the tech's going to get started on it when promised, and they're going to get back to me when I've promised to the customer, right? Those commitments have to be met. And so with mentioning communication and getting everyone on the same process, everyone clearly sees if they're running ahead or behind schedule. So there's even hey, you're overdue by 18 minutes to the technician when they crest over the promised times. And so everyone knows, and it starts flashing on the dispatcher screen so they can say, hey, this is starting to be affected, right? And it'll even start dragging that appointment across as that time gets longer than it needs to. And it will displace any promises so they know proactively, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I know this one's running behind. I got to find space for these 2 other jobs. Otherwise, I'm going to start upsetting customers. So it's all just that clear, concise communication, right, of what's going to happen. And then we can update the customer. If I see a flashing job as an advisor, I know it's running behind. I either get an update or update the customer. Hey, run a little behind. Hopefully you haven't left your house yet, because the last thing you want them doing is tapping their foot in front of you, waiting for this job to be fixed or finished up. So, I mean, it's all about communication. I mean, keeping it clear.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that you say the service advisor part, because I think so often in our shops, that is the most underrated position that's out there. We obviously very much value technicians and what they do because they're doing the work. But we've had several conversations on this podcast where we've talked about the importance of service advisors, but there's a lot of turnover with service advisors, right? I think that's one of the main concerns. And we actually had a person on to talk about that at one point, to where he was saying that, obviously I think service advisor turnover is somewhere around 50% a year. It's just an astronomical amount.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting thing that you bring up, because when you look at that, that's one of the big frustrations we hear from technicians, is that, hey, we just got this service advisor to know what they're doing. They're good at what they're doing. I train them. I help train them to get to where they need to be. Yeah. And now they're gone again. And so they almost lose faith in the process that service advisor is going to be there for any level of time. And it sounds like your tool might help maybe
100%.
Help that service advisor out, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we found with SocketTime, is that the advisors, when they can commit to a time to a customer and believe in that commitment, then they are so much happier in their job. Because if they have a customer upset with them or come to them saying, hey, I need my car by 3 p.m. tomorrow, I'm going out of town, I need this done. And then when they can't believe that their shop's actually going to deliver on that commitment, even though they've told maybe the manager, they told whoever, hey, this has to happen, and it doesn't happen because they've already said yes to too many other things, then they get tired of being yelled at, or they're just like, well, I just feel like a failure, because I'm trying to help this customer, I'm trying to do what I can, but yet we're not able to deliver on it, and they just kind of feel stuck in the middle, right? They just kind of feel like, I can't control what's happening in the shop, but yet I've got these customers asking for all these commitments from me, and they're constantly apologizing. And no one wants to be in that type of role. No one wants to be that person to constantly apologize for not delivering.
And it makes it very difficult to sell work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really tough to upsell work, and you get an inspection that, hey, the car needs tires, brakes, and this, but yet you're already running 2 days behind on the work, whatever. You're not going to get that sale, and so then they watch all that extra income they could have had just go out the door because the shop wasn't able to deliver on it. And that's what we found with SocketTime, is that now advisors can actually believe in what they're saying. They're confidently saying, yes, I can get this done by then. I've already got the time scheduled for that technician, and they, all that communication's happening, and they're not putting out fires all day long. They're not constantly apologizing, and so they're much happier in their position. And now they're truly just selling service and taking care of people rather than apologizing for not getting it.
Yeah. For even something that they didn't cause. Yeah. I mean, you're basically in the middle of trying to say sorry for 6 other departments behind you, and now you're just taking the brunt of that. It's important.
The stores with SocketTime have probably some of the lowest advisor turnover
I was a little shocked at 50%.
Yeah, I was going to say, just speaking from the Wolfe Automotive Group, we have very little advisor turnover.
Love to hear that.
In fact, I'm trying to think of last time we've had one. Have one leave. They all really enjoy this type of tool. So
not 50%.
No, I can't even think of the last one.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's always good to hear from technicians that kind of point that stuff out. But the more and more I'm learning about that service advisor role and the importance of it, I think even I was guilty at some point of like, well, just take care of it. Like, it's your job, go take care
Yeah.
of it. And when you look at it and you start to look at all the factors and all the people that they interact with each and every day, they're talking to the customers, they're talking to the technicians, they're talking to the management, they're talking to everybody. And any way that they can kind of control that chaos is, I think, very, very helpful. But the one thing you said to me that really, really stuck out was they need to trust that when they tell a customer something, that that's actually going to happen. And if that doesn't, and they feel like they're getting burned over and over again, and
Yeah.
like anybody would feel like an idiot at that point, right? It
Yeah.
drives your confidence down. It drives your confidence in yourself down, confidence in your shop down, everything. And it just, I think that carries through in that conversation with that customer too. They sense that maybe there is that chaos on the other side of on
Mhm.
the other side of the shop. So I
Yeah.
think that is incredibly important that we arm our advisors with good information that they can then confidently go to
Well, that's what drives that behavior to come up with clever techniques to try to drive jobs sooner, right? The when he needs it at 4, but tell it 1. Call it a waiter when it's not a waiter. I mean, we all see that, and it just depends on the shop a little bit how prolific that is, but it happens a little bit, and
Yeah.
then you got to build up that what I call the spiral of death. You have to stop it because, right, the advisors learn not to trust this, and then the dispatcher, no, I mean, they all know that, oh, well, this guy's always changing that time, so they stop trusting the promised times, so they'll just get it in when it's convenient to them, and then, the techs start to learn that all this stuff's behind, so they stop trying to upsell work because what's the point? It's going to be, the customer's already going to be wanting to leave before I get this all back to them anyways. So why do a multi-point? It just creates this like complete spiral of death, and stopping that's important. But giving tools that can stop it is important. I mean, if you're managing from a pack of, paper from your desk, it's very difficult to leaf through and figure out the one that needs to go actually ahead of everyone, because they are a true waiter with a promise time that's about to elapse. And so with a tool that gives you the visual representation of what that stack is very powerful.
Absolutely. I tell you, some of our stores even have gone as far as to put like 60, 72-inch flat screens on their service drive that show all the appointments coming in, each technician. And you don't even have to show the technicians' names necessarily. We just show where all that work is being consumed and what that looks like. And it just helps everyone involved, whether it's the advisor dealing with a walk-in or whether it's a manager just wanting to know, hey, how are things running in the shop? But having a TV with all that true representation of what's really happening is very helpful.
Technicians, have you checked out WrenchWay yet? WrenchWay is a free online community for automotive and diesel professionals. Whether you're looking for a job or not, WrenchWay makes it easy to explore new opportunities, stay up to date on what's going on in the automotive and diesel communities in your area, and helps improve and promote the technician profession. Check out all of the job details you care about before you apply or interview with WrenchWay Top Shops. Details like photos of the shop and answers to the questions you actually care about instead of the same old copy and paste job description you see everywhere else. Open to new job opportunities but don't want to apply yet? Create an anonymous reverse job post and let shops reach out to you and see what's going on with the industry in your area through WrenchWay's Shop Talk. Join the WrenchWay online community for free by visiting wrenchway.com or by downloading the WrenchWay mobile app. Link is in the show notes. How important is it to have those kind of elephant in the room types of conversations with an advisor where you're saying, hey, I know in the past you will mark somebody as a waiter, or you will maybe move the pickup time to a different one. And we understand that the reason you did that is because you needed to make sure that stuff was being done. What we're doing here is trying to kind of completely alleviate that. So we need you to be very upfront as well. Does that change maybe their approach as well?
Sure.
Starting with that conversation, committing to that conversation, and then following through with it solves it. And that's a big ask. But as long as I think everyone that is a key component of the department is bought in, it will change fairly quick. And then as they see the chaos subside, and hours starting to go up and things ran more efficiently and it's not as stressful, it will self-heal. But it starts with that upfront conversation for sure and buy-in.
So one thing that I'll say too is that, and this is just kind of an example of what can happen in a shop. So we took a shop that was doing 146 hours per technician per month for all of 2018 and 2019. That was their average when you look at the whole year, right? And he said, okay, 146 hours per month per technician. That's pretty good. Well, this shop believed that they were completely overwhelmed with work. They said, there's no more we can do. In fact, we can't run our technicians at this pace anymore because they're overwhelmed. We're losing technicians because they're not happy with the stress. The advisors weren't happy. And when we installed SocketTime in 2020, their hours per technician started going up and going up. And last year, they did 186 hours per technician.
Wow.
So they did 40 more hours per technician in productivity. And yet they felt slow. The advisors were like, it feels slower than it used to be. Well, that's funny because we produced a whole lot more hours out of the shop than ever. We actually didn't have more technicians. We actually had one less technician in the shop than we had, but yet we did a tremendous amount. So that's just one example of what shops can see when they switch to this type of mindset of, don't set the appointments on the advisor availability. Don't keep saying yes and having that big pile of work on the dispatcher's desk thinking that that's maximizing your hours, because that's what was going on at the shop. They thought that they were maximizing because they always had a 2-week backlog of work sitting there waiting to go into the shop on the lot, just ready to go. And they thought they were maximizing everything, but what they were doing is they were constantly managing chaos. They weren't being efficient, and they were upsetting all their customers, and everyone was spending more time on the chaos and the stress of, basically apologizing to customers and dealing with all that. And it just felt busy because it was just a constant level of stress. Or now they don't have that stress. They're doing more hours and they don't have that stack of ROs. In fact, most nights when they leave, they said the dispatcher's desk is either clean or there may be 1 or 2 carryovers for the next day that still need to get looked at or whatever for something that came in late. But they said they don't have a stack of work sitting there. So and yet they're doing more business than ever. So it's just kind of a true testament to what SocketTime can do for a shop and changing that mindset.
That clean desk is a beautiful thing at the end of the day. That makes you feel so much better.
As long as you're producing a ton of hours.
Yeah, as long as you're doing that.
I don't want to just say that it's a clean desk and there's nothing to work. I mean, it's a very packed, to his point, the hours show the proof. And another thing that is sometimes forgotten is, and we haven't talked too much on even the variable side, there's pieces of this that are very important on the variable, where we've got a trade-in tool, so every customer will get an appraisal of their vehicle with the multi-point in mind. So it's not just looking at solving problems on the fixed. I mean, this is really helping both sides of the fence. And it's important because if you have an upgrade kind of team or anything like that within your dealership, problems with those programs, as great as they can be, is customers are customers, right? They show up 30 minutes early, they show up 30 minutes late, they don't show up at all, and you tee up all these salesmen or salespeople to greet them, and they don't show up, or they're already gone. And so we go in, and again, we're kind of need-based solution is, well, that's ridiculous. If they show up a half hour early, let's notify the assigned salesman at that moment, right? We know when the write-up process begins. We know if you have a Hunter alignment check system at the door, we actually know that the car's arrived, immediately marking it here. That will trigger the variable to get involved sooner, right? And then
also tell parts to pull the parts
I mean, it's here, right?
Yeah, there's some really neat efficiencies that we've been able to integrate with, and
Yeah.
Even the alignment we have pull into the multi-point inspection from that quick check. So I don't know how many stores
it's not every
in the country
store, but it's a
have
lot
that,
of them.
but it is a great tool. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's definitely
cool.
worth the money. It's a really neat wow factor for the customer, but then it's once you show a customer the alignment's out on the service drive that quickly, they pretty much always buy one.
Yeah, that is really, really impressive. And again, I think it's another opportunity to make that technician's life a little bit easier. When you mention, the recon side and you mention the part side, that's one of the biggest complaints we hear from technicians as well is, the part side and the silo that they live in versus the service department. If you can maybe take down those silos a little bit, I think everybody's maybe just a little bit happier.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you typically see for car count when somebody takes on SocketTime? Do you see a dip in car count because you're trying to maybe control that a little bit more, or is it same thing, just more efficient?
Yeah, believe it or not, it actually usually goes up because they feel like that they are maximizing the shop, but then what they're not doing is they're not maximizing the work mix to best fit their technicians. So they're maybe saying yes to too much main shop work and not enough oil changes, or vice versa, right? And so just because one part of their shop feels really busy, they feel like they're busy overall. And so we've actually seen car counts go up, although there's no setting in SocketTime that says, hey, this is my maximum number of appointments a day. It has nothing to do with the number of appointments, it has to do with the technician availability and the hours available. So it's all restricted based on that. So, I mean, we've seen, like I think I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I mean, we've seen some very wide ranges of appointments per day with the same number of technicians. So it just depends on that work mix for that day, what's coming in. But, I mean, there's shops that sometimes will have 75 appointments. The next day they may have 140, 150. With the same number of technicians, it just has to do with the work mix and what customers are asking for on each of those appointments. If it's just an oil change, tire rotation versus brakes, tires, all that other stuff, that's going to add up and add time to it. That's going to change.
And remember, you're no longer in that flow of too much, too little, too much, too little, too much, too little, and that lag. There's roughly speaking about a 72-hour lag from going from a schedule that's shut down, right? We got to get caught up, to turning it back on and then filling it, right? Most people aren't twiddling their thumbs waiting for the availability to open up on your website. So you got to wait for that natural progression to kind of fill back up. So you get the little, maybe 24-hour lag before it starts to fill, but you've wasted that much time. And this is I call time inventory, right? I mean, you have so much inventory to sell, but the weird thing about time is you don't get it back. So if you don't sell it then, you don't get an opportunity to sell it later. So that really starts to add up on itself. Again, if you're doing that kind of yin yang, going from too busy to not busy enough sort of approach, and this, again, car count, I don't think it drops off.
So, one thing that we like to ask service managers when we're talking to them about SocketTime and potentially install it in their shop is that we ask them, we say, well, how often are your shops set up perfectly for the day? How often is the day just the schedule? You have the perfect amount of work scheduled, and they just laugh, right? They always laugh. That never happens. Well, that's a problem. That's the problem we're trying to solve, and I believe we've solved. And the stores that are using us, when we ask them that question, it's like all the time we have the right. It's just that's how most days go, and that's a huge thing for a service manager. I mean that's huge. To know I have the right amount of work for my advisors, for my technicians, for my parts department, for my customers. I've got the right amount of work, and I've said yes to the right amount of things every day.
And we had a large store that had this magic number, 89 appointments. That was what their current scheduler was limited to. And when we flipped on SocketTime, it jumped to 150.
Wow.
So they ran pretty heavy for a month before they started tweaking a few things down. They're better numbers, 130. And again, I don't like to talk appointment count because it's really hours that we're selling, but it is a typical conversation. But yeah, 130 was really their number. 125, 130. So for decades, they've been basically shaving 40 cars a day that they didn't even know they were saying no to. So again, we can really
basically they found
shed
that,
light on that.
Yeah, they found that every once in a while 89 was too much, and so that's kind of the 89. We know we can at least get through that, but anything more than that is going to be a problem. When that had no bearing on, I mean that's not what they should have been managing to. Yeah, 89 was definitely not the right number.
Man, it's fascinating stuff because I think this is something that a lot of shops really, really struggle with, the scheduling piece, the ability to adapt to the new needs of a technician, just in general, running a shop that's not complete chaos, it is scary for a lot of people. So I think what you guys are doing is phenomenal. I think being able to continue to grow it and make these shops lives easier is hugely impactful to not only the management, but that service advisor, that technician, everybody involved. And the easier it makes their lives, the happier they're going to be coming in every single day. And I think the two of you guys and everybody at SocketTime is doing a phenomenal job at that. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.